let me start with kind of like, in case anybody's jumping in for the first time, or they see the word ranting or whatever on the title, and they're trying to figure out what I'm doing. What I've done in the past is go over arguments that I think are logically based or objective. These arguments are in relation to why I think the tech industry as a whole, hardware and software, is in bad shape. I have gone over academic studies, I've gone over scientific studies, I've gone over opinion articles, I've gone over videos. I have done something that I don't think anybody else is doing. I'm pretty positive no one else is doing. I have criticized the big tech streamers to the tune of being blocked by some of them for my criticism of the way that they utilize the influence they wield over the tech industry to perpetuate idiotic paradigms in favor of views, eyeballs, deals, things like this. Not all of them. There are some exceptions. There are some solid tech streamers out there. But this is what I've been doing. And I'm actually beginning to see some light at the end of the tunnel, but I'm also beginning to see a lot more darkness before that light comes. It is my opinion, having gone through all of these things in the past, which I'm now going to start turning into shorter videos. So I will begin to slice up the past videos into properly titled, episodic, step-by-step. Here's one study we went over. Here's one article we went over. Here's an argument we went over, things like that. I'm going to start doing that on my YouTube channel. So we've gone over a lot. And it's become abundantly clear to me that most people in the tech industry, not just programmers, but leadership, management, executives, do not care. They either don't care. Yeah, I should be clear. They either don't care or they don't know what to care about. And unfortunately, we as programmers have been neutered somewhat by our own doing, and somewhat by generally the industry's doing, so that we make it impossible for even ourselves to kind of enable ourselves. We've taken away the tools that we typically have to have conversations about what it is we need as programmers to be effective. We don't even know what we need to be effective. I don't see that changing anytime soon. So that's kind of the bad news, right? The good news is that I do see a tide shifting. And that shift is in the form of a come to Jesus moment, if you will, quote unquote, where the industry as a whole realizes that they have been focused on entirely the wrong things. They have trusted entirely the wrong people. They have trusted entirely the wrong mechanisms. And that's going to manifest itself in some rather dramatic ways. Again, the downside is going to be that those dramatic ways are going to have an impact on your life and my life, as I have gone over in previous live streams, which are all free to watch on my YouTube under the live tab. Again, I will be turning those into episodic videos, so it's easier to parse through them. But it's really clear that the consequences of our complacency and willingness to just accept the status quo and everything's fine and it's not as bad as you say, Spira, and all of these things are going to have dramatic consequences to us. However, out of those dramatic consequences will come some positive things. People will realize the mistakes that they have made. I don't have a timeline for this. Maybe it's next week, maybe it's next year. I don't know, but I don't think it's too far off. That means that I probably don't have to do very much anymore. I don't have to go on these long rants. I don't have to do the things that nobody else seems to be willing to do, which is have the logical, objective, scientific, academic, programmatic, domain expert-driven arguments about these kinds of issues. I can kind of just let things ride the way that they're going to ride. Let things go in the direction they're going to go. Instead of fighting upstream, I can let the stream take its natural course, which I believe to be a self-correction course at the cost of a lot. So I've narrowed down a few topics that I'm going to talk about today. This might be one of the last times that I do it for a long time, not ever, but it might be a long time before I get into this kind of data again or try and make these kinds of arguments again. Moving forward, I might just focus more on just my video game, which is kind of a counter to the entire narrative of the industry, which is that you can't do anything because you're too stupid, and I'm trying to prove that that's not true. So the video game, I think, is still part and parcel of what I'm trying to argue for here. But this concept of having to track down information, track down studies, etc., in order to prove a point, I think will become moot in the not so distant future. In the meantime, it's bad. And what I would like to do is to clarify and bring to great attention the primary theme of why I started streaming in the first place. If you're a programmer in the industry, are being taught and dealt with, and those are two different things, but they go together, incorrectly. The things that you're typically taught in most educational academic criteria, the things that you're being taught when you open up your favorite streamer and watch them do whatever the hell they're doing, the things that you're being taught when you talk to your colleagues and they encourage you, if not handcuff you, to using a library, framework, or language that takes shortcuts from point A to point C. These are all things that have an underlying message. And that underlying message is that you're too stupid to deal with anything else. I want to make that clear. I've said it before 100 times. I might say it 100 times again. You are not. Sure, fine, maybe there's an exception. I'm pretty stupid too. But generally speaking, there is a job that programmers have. It's just like when you go to, say, the mall and, take your local mall, and you have people who work behind the counter, you have janitors, you have security guards, etc. There is a job, and it comes with a job description, and that job description usually includes a list of things that you should be able to execute on your job. When you're told that you cannot execute the things that you need to do on your job without some kind of crutch or shortcut or easy button, you are effectively being told that you cannot do your job. And therefore, it's no wonder that you suffer from the cognitive dissonance, also known as imposter syndrome. Further to that, you're being incentivized to continue to perpetuate these kinds of ideas by receiving a paycheck, stock options, a job, whatever you want to call it, that continues to push the paradigm that you are reliant on these things that have been quote unquote solved for you. Use a library, use a language, use a framework so that you don't have to deal with the problems that come with what people used to do or the way programming used to be done in the old days with the rose-colored glasses and all of that. All of these things can be ultimately reduced to you're being told that you're stupid. We need in this industry for you to reject that claim and to ask questions about why on earth these paradigms are being used where you work. It is critically important, and this is why I'm stressing this, that you as a programmer, whether you are junior or senior, understand what questions are appropriate to ask in the confines of wherever it is you're working. This is a great equalizer in that the question you ask does not have to come from a seniority level person. The question of why are we using React? Why are we using Rust? Why are we using Svelte? Why are we using Next? Why are we using anything at all? Any framework at all? Any language at all? Doesn't matter how low level. It could be assembly. It could be C. It really doesn't matter. You do not have to be senior at your job to ask why. Despite what you may be told, despite how you might be made to feel, you are not too stupid to ask that question. And it's the answers to that question. The answers to that question are not as hard as you might think they are. A junior who's just starting out fresh, straight out of a boot camp or a computer science degree or whatever it is, can ask these questions. As a matter of fact, I would say that it is your imperative duty as a programmer to do so. You ought to do so. If you do not do this, you are not doing your job. And what you have to remember is that every senior developer, every language, framework, library, every abstraction, every shortcut, everything started with someone who didn't know as much as you creating the thing that you now get to depend on. Everyone had to start somewhere, and it's probably where you're starting off right now. The other thing to consider here is that you have a lot more power over your domain than most people have in their industry. Even as a junior developer, you tend to be in a lot more control over the tools you use, over tools you build to enable yourself. You can enable yourself more than most people can in their jobs. You can ask questions that most people cannot ask in their jobs. You can execute towards the same end goal in ways and varieties that most people do not have in their jobs. This is why I think it's critical for me to say what I'm saying, because you don't have to be senior level to understand the concept that you have the capability and possibility to tackle complicated problems that aren't as complicated as they are made out to seem in the first place. The reason why I say it's an imperative duty, so there's a logical entailment, right? So logically speaking, if you're a junior developer, and I make the argument that you should be able to ask questions like, why are we doing this? Why is this easier? Can you prove to me that this is easier? What is the logical reasoning behind this approach or that approach, etc.? If that is true, then it is also true that the same holds true for senior developers. If it holds true for a junior developer, then a senior developer should be able to ask the same questions. I find most often that they do not. I find most often that senior developers are actually far happier than junior developers to offload a bunch of work that they find mundane or simple or already solved so that they do not have to reinvent the wheel. In part, that's not always their fault. They might be under pressure from external factors like business requirements or timelines, scrutiny, or things like this. However, it is still imperative, just as much on senior developers to push back on that as it is on junior developers. There is a reason why it's imperative. There is a reason why I'm making an ought claim, a duty claim, a you should claim. Just like anybody else could make the claim that, for example, if there's somebody whose life could be saved by, say, you doing the Heimlich maneuver and you know how to do it, you ought to do it to save their life. That would be the appropriate action to take should you have the ability to do that, because therefore you save a life. It is your duty to try to do what you can to save life, preserve life, for example. So in the same principle, there is an ought claim I'm making. The ought claim being that it is your responsibility to make sure that you are bare minimum asking the questions, ideally able to answer in some informed manner the answer to those questions, and then make decisions. Maybe they lead up to the same place that they do right now, although I doubt they would, but that's a personal take. But even if they do, you should be able to make a far more informed claim as to why you're doing what you're doing. You ought to be able to do that. It is part of your job description as a programmer to be able to have that conversation, to be able to even know what questions to ask. And whether you are a junior, intermediate, or senior developer, these things are incumbent. They are duties that you have. This also means that you're then capable of talking to whatever external pressures you have to do something different or contrary to some educated decision you've come to, and tell that person or this group of people or this external factor why you should not do something or why you should do something. It is your job. It's your responsibility, same as it is mine. When I was starting out as a programmer, homeless, broke, working for free, nobody wanted to hire me because I didn't have any experience, guess what everybody expected of me? To have that level of ought or duty. They were hiring me for that level of experience, which I had to go and gain. They were hiring me to be able to understand what I was getting myself into, what are the right questions to ask, what are the right arguments to make, how can I make educated decisions based on what I'm hearing about business factors or other factors that are related to my work, etc., etc. That has always been and will always be a part of my job. I didn't get to escape that, and neither do you. That is a primary reason why I have gone over all the things that I have gone over to date, academically, scientifically, logically, objectively. This is why I argue so much against things like React or other types of frameworks, libraries, and languages that give you these easy buttons, because they're preferential. How many times have we agonized over tiny little things in my video games, such as creating a struct versus creating a flat array in C or JavaScript, or pick your language? We've talked about many different languages where we talk about this. That's just one example. But the reason why we do that is because most people do what's called vibe-based programming, which is whatever makes you feel good, whatever makes you feel productive, whatever makes you feel like you're providing business value. Those are the key metrics. And I believe that I have proven without a shadow of a doubt that those metrics are pure and utter horse shit and do not have anything to do with your job, with the job description that you are being asked to do. You are not being paid to be comfortable. You're not being paid to push an easy button. You're not being paid to feel good about what you're coding. What you're being paid to do as a programmer, unless you're working on a personal project, is to execute on a goal. And the primary purpose of executing on that goal is to do so in the most performant and efficient manner you can. People think efficiency means I feel good. But I have proven time and time again that that's not the case. And I am about to prove it yet again. To go back to why I am making an ought, you must tackle your job in this specific way. The consequences of vibes-based, preferential, my preferences, I feel good. It doesn't really matter how performant something is. Hardware masks it these days. Yada, 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 yada. All these arguments. The consequences of that, I once again believe I have proven without a shadow of a doubt, and I will make a bold claim that I'm the only one on tech streaming anywhere that you can find who is making the logical, scientific, and academic arguments for why my statements are true. These things have consequences that we cannot even begin to fathom. We've gone over some of them. For example, cybersecurity vulnerabilities, the consequences of cybersecurity exploitation being the third largest economy in the world. We've gone over how things like TypeScript don't actually save you any time. They don't actually save you anything, pretty much, compared to vanilla JavaScript. We've gone over how Rust isn't as memory safe as it is marketed to be. We've gone over how you can create things that your favorite tech stream influencer says you cannot create without a crutch of a library, framework, or whatever. I've pulled up Notepad and done it by hand, on stream, live, no coaching, no pre-advanced warning, nothing like that. High school dropout here could do it. I've gone over so many different things that prove what I'm saying. Nobody else is doing this. Mostly, I'm going to call a lot of people out right now, probably because they're too chicken shit of being exposed as the frauds that they are. However, for the most part, most of you are not actually frauds, and it is to you who I'm speaking to. Most of you are far more capable than you think. You're just being told that you're not. And I want you to be very aware of the consequences of accepting that messaging and internalizing it and then going along with it because of whatever fear you might have to question it. I think it is imperative as part of your job. And now I'm going to make an argument referring back to previous studies and arguments that I've had and so on, where it is not just part of your job, but it is also part of your duty as a member of society to question these aspects of the tech industry. Because when you don't, what you accept are huge consequences to you and to your loved ones who may or most likely are not involved in the tech industry at all. The consequences of cybersecurity, for example, because you just npm install whatever comes with your Create React app or whatever it is you're doing, we have gone over the academic studies, the case studies of many cybersecurity vulnerabilities as a result of npm vulnerabilities and how they impact people's lives. And I mean literally their lives. I mean literally death or life. And you never know when one day your code or the code of a colleague that you didn't feel obligated to question why they were doing something they were doing because you just accepted it as it just is, or because an executive pressured you to and you couldn't articulate why that's probably not a good idea. You have no idea when the consequences of that code will have a negative impact on your life or the life of someone you care. Nobody talks about this. So, to that end, this is what I mean by referencing back to earlier in the stream that when I started out, there will be a come to Jesus moment. And I think that moment is coming up fast. That's my personal opinion. I could be wrong. But with the advent of AI, which we're about to get into as well on tonight's stream, I think it has become abundantly clear to me, just to me, from what I've seen and from the absolutely idiotic arguments that I have online on social media with people who defend their positions when I say something like we need to be doing better or React sucks, you shouldn't use it or whatever, and people defend it to the hilt, or AI or whatever. Um, I think it's become abundantly clear to me that there are going to be there's going to be a wall, that it's going to be hit soon, and everyone's going to have to face the music. So I really don't have to fight very much. I just kind of have to sit back and do my thing and let things play out. It would be my preference that we didn't have to hit that wall. And so I'm making a call to all programmers, whether junior or senior, that it is your imperative ought duty to take your job seriously and unfortunately let go of your comfort zone. Unfortunately or fortunately, depends on how you look at it. But your comfort zone does not have a place. It does not matter ultimately in the job that you have to do. Okay.